Jim Monahan along with Chris Swendeman. We're back with the 2 minute drill. And Swendeman, this Red Sox fan would like to congratulate the New York Yankees.
You don't say.
I do say they're doing something finally that they should have done 3 years ago. But hey, better late than never. And what we're talking about, of course, is assigning Anthony Volpe down to the minor leagues, AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre, following his rehab stint. And part of the reason for that is, well, Jose Caballero is playing very well, as is the team. So what the Yankees are doing is take the pressure off the kid, which they should have done in what was his rookie season, rather than bring him up. We've talked about this,
Yep.
you know, on and on and on. They rushed him to the big leagues. Yes, he won a gold glove his first year, but it's been a struggle. He got hurt at the end of last year. He was playing hurt, had offseason surgery, does his rehab stint, and when it was time for the Yankees to make a roster move on Sunday and decide what to do with him, they did the right thing. And they put him down in AAA for a while to let him get his legs underneath him, get his bearings, and see if he can't work his way back up to the major leagues. It's 3 years too late, but they're finally doing the right thing here.
Well, that collective noise you heard yesterday afternoon was every Yankee fan going, "Oh, thank goodness." Because no Yankee fan, and this one included in myself, wanted to see him up with the big club. They're playing well. I think cohesively, they're a really good unit for the most part. I love the game that Caballero brings and his dynamic to the Yankees. He is hitting over his head, I'll say that. But I like his game. He's got a decent glove, and he's playing confident baseball. Nothing that we could say about Volpe last year. And I think, like you, I've agreed with you multiple times saying that they rushed Volpe to the majors because they saw a star in the making, a Jersey kid, growing up a Yankee fan, growing up a fan of Jeter. It had all the storylines that you want, except that he wasn't ready. And, it just snowballed. And last year was the culmination of just bringing him up to, he just became a mess. I mean, even last week in Somerset, he got picked off first. There was a play, they showed the highlight of him wandering off first, and they picked him off. And that's in Somerset. And no disrespect to the Patriots, but you've played 3 years in the majors, and you're still winding up making bonehead plays that you made in the majors that got you there. So it seems like he's still in his own head, and hopefully this time will be well spent and get him back to basics, and maybe, like we've said before, the hard reset that he needs on his career. We'll see. But, he and George Lombard are two, players that their names have been bandied about for a long time. One's going one way and one's going the other way. And I don't have to tell you which one's going down and which one's ascending at this point. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with both of them, either later this year or how they set it up for next year.
A couple of things about Caballero, who is playing pretty well, all things considered. At some point, he is going to revert to the back of his baseball card. He's a 239 career hitter.
That's a great line.
He's in the 250s right now. You just said it. He's hitting a little bit over his head. He's playing better defensively than I think we've seen, and there's a reason for that. He's not playing left field one night, right field the next night, third base the following night. Oh, we're going to stick you in center field. Oh, can you play second base? Oh, no, we want to put you at short. He played in 2025. Caballero played 6 different positions. Now, part of it's because he's very athletic and he can play 6 different positions. But sooner or later, it has to have an effect on you. And I think eventually, like I just said, he will revert to the back of his baseball card. With regard to Lombard, there's something to keep an eye on. He's up with Scranton Wilkes-Barre. They brought him up a little over a week ago, I guess it was. And they're playing him at shortstop and third base. Keep an eye on where they play him. For that matter, keep an eye on what they do with Volpe. If they move him occasionally from shortstop to second base. What is that telling you? Because Caballero could go to third, Lombard could go to short if indeed he's on the fast track to come up, and Volpe maybe plays second base.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, Jazz is on. Oh, this is the final year of his deal. I do not see the Yankees in any world re-signing Jazz next year. So if you start seeing Volpe play second, well, there's a grander plan in place. And I think that may take some pressure off Volpe too, because obviously second, a little bit easier to play than short. And if they can get his bat going, that would be a good thing. And I could definitely see Volpe being the easy replacement for Jazz, and Lombard, if they can get him to play a good third, well, that solves your problem in-house once again for Ryan McMahon, who has been playing better of late, but still, that's your weakest link right now by far is third base. And it was talked about in the preseason, in spring training, that third base could be the weak link, and it's definitely shown. McMahon just, I don't think, is what they wanted him to be or hoped he would be. And if you start seeing Lombard move more to third, like you said, I think that's going to be the bigger plan in place to maybe see Lombard take over at some point from McMahon.
So, Yankee fans, while you're watching what's going on at Scranton Wilkes-Barre, and I hope you are, keep an eye on where Lombard Jr. is playing. Yep. Keep an eye on where Volpe is playing, and it may give you some insight into what the Yankees are doing. In the short term with Volpe, and the Yankees deny that this is part of what's going on with him, if he stays down in AAA or in the minors per se, never mind AAA, maybe he goes down to AA, but if he stays in the minors for 20 days, it pushes the clock on his free agency from 2028 to 2029. And while the Yankees can publicly say, no, that's not why we're doing it, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if that is exactly what they do and why they do it.
Well, you know what? And I'm not a big proponent of this by any means, because I think a lot of the teams play with the clock, especially on the rookie deals. When they bring them up, they're ready to play. And, you see all these great rookies, minus Connor Griffin for Pittsburgh, who they brought up and did the right thing by. But you've seen a lot of this over the years. Chris Bryant really was one of the players that reminded me of teams that played with the clock. Because remember, Chris Bryant was pro ready at the time for the Cubs, and they kept holding him down. And all of a sudden, in second week of May, after that Super 2 deadline at the time was passed, magically Chris Bryant was ready to play for the big club. Now he's ready. 2 weeks prior, he wasn't ready, and he still needed some seasoning, quote unquote. But you've seen a lot of teams do this with their young talent to have that extra year. Now with the Yankees and Volpe, because of what's happened with him, I'm almost in the camp for the Yankees to get something back on their investment. And because he's had a hard time and because they rushed him, to get that extra year and maybe get the better of Volpe down the road after having him in the minors, I'm okay with that, because you know what? It's been a couple brutal years on the job training for him. Maybe, just maybe, you can get something out of Volpe that will be beneficial for that extra year that you may have him for.
Volpe may not be what the Yankees thought he was going to be. Now, he's not Bobby Witt Jr., we know that, right. But I still think he can be a very serviceable major league player. And again, I think they're doing the absolute right thing, putting him down, AAA, let him get his legs under him and see what happens. Again, keep an eye on where he plays and keep an eye on where Lombard Jr. plays. Yeah. One more note with the Yankees, and that was the sad news on Monday morning of the passing of the legendary. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but boy, talk about an icon and a legendary broadcaster. And that would be John Sterling, who was the Yankee radio voice from 1989 to the beginning of 2024. And he did 5,060 consecutive games. We talk about Cal Ripken and the Iron Man streak. 5,060 games. Show me anybody who has shown up for work 5,060 consecutive games. Didn't matter if he was a little under the weather or not, he was there. And it was basically, he was the soundtrack to our summers for so many years.
Absolutely. And as somebody who was fortunate to be a fan of a team that won, through the 90s and the early 2000s, he was the voice of all of that. He was the voice for so many years in the car, in the summer, in the backyards, listening to ball games on the radio. He was the voice. And when he retired, it didn't feel right at first, because it's like, wait, it's like all these other teams, the Dodgers were like, how many voices like John's can you say over, how many baseball teams were lucky enough to have somebody that long? Vin Scully, Jack Buck, Harry Carey, Harry Kalas for the Phillies, and then maybe a few more. But Yankee fans, I don't think they realized how lucky they were to have Sterling for so long. I mean, he was quirky, and some of his calls, sometimes I tried to use the nice word for it. I mean, he could be goofy at times, but it was our goofy. Older Yankee fans grew up with Mel Allen. Some remember Bill White and Scooter for TV purposes, but John Sterling was my wheelhouse for listening to games in late 80s and the 90s and all those championship teams. You can make a case Sterling was as important to those teams as the players themselves, because he called some of those most monumental moments. Every save Mariano ever had,
every pitch he threw, John Sterling called it. Think about that. I mean, it's just amazing. And, it's just so heartbreaking, to hear his passing this morning. It's just, it was probably as heartbreaking as hearing when Bob Shepard passed away. I mean, Bob Shepard, he had to record his voice because Jeter wouldn't have somebody else intro him. So Yankee fans were really lucky to have golden voices like Shepard's and Sterling for so many years. I had a chance to interview John a number of times when I was doing the morning show on WDHA here in New Jersey, and he was always a character. He did not have a modern cell phone. So if you texted him, he never texted you back. It was always a phone call back. And he wasn't always sure who he was calling when he called you, even though you had texted him. I had the opportunity. How I met John was through coaching two of his sons. He had triplets, a daughter and two sons, Brad and Derek. And I coached both of them in travel baseball. And John would frequently come to the games. If the temperature was below 72, he would have a scarf around his neck. You have to protect the money-making machine,
Absolutely.
But it was always fun. You're like, hey, John Sterling's here. I was in the back of my head, I'm hearing him call our game as it's playing out in front of us,
Absolutely. I mean, you can hear some of the, I was thinking of it today, just reminiscing, just driving home. And I'm thinking of like some of my favorite calls by him. When they got Matsui, it's a thriller from Godzilla. Yeah. And Jason Giambi, the Giambino, and so many, Bernie Williams for years, burn, baby, burn.
That was where it started. Those home run calls started with Bernie Williams.
Absolutely. And, you think of, A-Rod and so many others that he made. My favorite will always be, as goofy as it was, I loved when the Yankees had Curtis Granderson, because every time Granderson hit a home run, the Grandy man can. I loved it. It's so schlocky, but it was fun. And I enjoyed. And, there's never going to be another Sterling. And the Yankees were lucky to have somebody that was such an iconic voice for such a long time. And I mean, while Michael Kay had a lot of the TV calls, Sterling had every game because the World Series started getting taken over by the major networks, where Sterling was always on the call for the Yankees. And that famous "the Yankees win," that was iconic. And how many Yankee fans will still say that to this day after the Yankees close out a game? I mean, there's only going to be one, and always John Sterling.
And you know the story behind the whole the Yankees win, right? It came after a long losing streak. And it was more of a sigh of relief for John. The Yankees win. Like he couldn't believe it type of thing. And it took on a life of its own to the point where somebody like David Ortiz would come on and kind of tweak Yankee fans with the Yankees lose.
Yes, he did it. I mean, last year he was doing it in the playoffs to Jeter and A-Rod when they were all on the panel together for Fox. He still did it. But you know what? It was almost a respectful way of doing it to zing them, but to pay homage because Poppy, better than anybody, has respect. And if he's doing that, there's a line of respect in it that he wants to zing, but it's also he's paying homage to Sterling and that legendary call.
And of course, we should also point out that in addition to doing the Yankees and doing them for so many years, he was more than just a one sport guy. He did the Baltimore Colts for a little while. He did the then Baltimore Bullets. He did the Atlanta Hawks. He did the New York, New Jersey Nets, depending upon where they were playing at the time. Did New York Islanders games. You want to talk about versatile and pipes. I mean, a voice that most broadcasters would just absolutely die for.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, if you have a voice like that, God bless you. Neither one of us do, and this is why we do podcasts and we're not calling, games. But to hear that, there are certain people. As soon as you hear one word that they say, you know who it is. And Sterling was one of those guys. He just didn't matter what he was saying. He could read the phone book. You knew who was reading it. And it's just, I just keep coming back to one word: iconic.
And it's only fitting that you're wearing your "That's Baseball, Susan" shirt.
Paying homage to John. I had to wear. This is one of my favorite shirts and one of my favorite sayings. I use this saying for more things in life. My wife will be talking to me about something serious. I'll be like, "Well, that's baseball, Susan," and she just looks at me like, "What?" And you can use it for everything, and I love that phrase.
And that wraps up another edition of the 2 Minute Drill podcast. Like, subscribe, thumbs up, thumbs down. Tell a friend if you like us. Tell an enemy if you hate us. Just tell somebody. And we will check in with you next week. Thanks, Chris.
You got it, Jim. Have a good one.
That's baseball, Susan.
It is.